Are you finding smart home devices offline and didn't know they were down? Like to have a way to proactively monitor everything in your smart home? Stay tuned, and I'm going to show you how to do this using something called NEMSLinux and a Raspberry Pi. Now, let's get started. Welcome to another edition of Tech Bytes with Ron Nutter, your home for all things relating to smart home technology. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to monitor your smart home using NEMSLinux and a Raspberry Pi. Hi, I'm Ron Nutter, and we're going to be working on this together. This content is also available as an Amazon Flash briefing or podcast. Please go to techbyteswithronnutter.com for more information. For any items mentioned in this episode, there are affiliate links in the description. If you click on these links, I will get a small commission, but that won't affect the price you pay for the item. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click on subscribe and enable notifications. If this video helps you, provides value, please click on the like button, thumbs up. Now, here's what we're going to be covering. First of all, what is NEMSLinux? And if you haven't heard of Nagios, you're going to really want to take a close look at this one. Then we're going to go over what are the required items. Then we will walk through installing NEMSLinux, and then we'll set up some very basic monitoring. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we'll be covering. So let's get on that road. The first subject on our topic list today is what is NEMSLinux, and I think we can best answer it by going over to the NEMS website and reading it right off their screen. And don't worry about the word enterprise. All this means in this case is it's a very comprehensive system. It's just been streamlined to work on a Raspberry Pi. And the more devices you get on your smart home network is the more things that's going to be important for you to be able to watch. So let's just take it one step at a time. You're going to be surprised at what you can do. Start out very simply. Just start out with using a ping. Then you can gradually get into the other services and other ways of monitoring that NEMS is capable of, or you can call this Nagios, but basically this is a kind of a turnkey system because Nagios in its native form can be very involved in setting up because you've got all these scripts and everything else. And with NEMS, this makes it that much easier for you to get up and running and be able to handle what you need to watch in your smart home. Well, to be able to monitor your smart home network is only going to really require two things. You're going to need to have a Raspberry Pi 4. You can do this earlier ones, but the larger your home network is, the more power it's going to take from the Raspberry Pi. So starting out with a 4 is going to be the way to go. And this is also another case to where the more that you need it to do means more memory it's going to need to have on board. So you'll want to have, at least the 2 gig model of RAM on Raspberry Pi. Depending on how large your network is, you may want to go straight for the 8, and just that way you've got some growth potential ready to work with it. And then you'll need some type of SD card. 16 gig is the minimum. Again, this is another one of those cases when having larger is going to give you more room for growth, depending on what kind of logging gets turned up at some point. Again, you will have room for that. So see what you can work with in your budget. And if you've already got a Raspberry Pi 2 gig, or you're just wanting to kick the tires and you got a Raspberry Pi 3, again, everything you need is going to be covered on their website, and you will see what your options are. So you'll start by going to the NEMS for RPI downlink, and this shows you the models that they know will work and the ones that will work but not really recommended. So let's go ahead and get started on installing NEMSLinux. Now, with any project that we start here on the channel, I'm always going to walk you through installing what you need to get up and running. Because I'm not going to assume you've done any of this before. You may not have been with the channel since the beginning. So out of respect for everyone that's watching, we want to go through the whole process. And if you've already done some of this, using the chapter headings, you can skip ahead to the next piece. So I'm going to go ahead and get Balena Etcher fired up here. And we'll say flash from file, and we just downloaded NEMS. And see, even though it was a .zip file, it already figured out there was an image file built in. And then we'll take the micro SD card that I've got and we'll plug that into the Raspberry Pi once I get it turned around in the USB slot just right. There's a problem with the drive. Yeah, we know that because we're getting ready to do something to it. So we'll click on flash and we'll get things started. Now, if you're wondering why, turn the lights back on here, why this has taken so long to create this image, look at the size in the upper right-hand corner there, 6.36 gigs. That's probably 2 to 3 times larger than anything that you may have worked with so far. So that's why it took a little while. So now this is all done. We can go through pulling out the micro SD card. We'll switch over here to demo cam. So we'll just take the card that we just burned. We'll slide it into the Raspberry Pi. And we'll put this back into the C4 Labs Bramble case. They're not sponsoring this video. I just have really gotten to enjoy their product. Make sure that the power is turned off, and it's not, is it? Okay. I think it's just a little bit of reserve power left in it. Okay. So I'm going to also plug in a micro HDMI cable because I want you to see this as it comes up, and you'll plug that into the HDMI 0 port, which is the one closest to the Raspberry Pi. And then, just as importantly, we'll plug in a network cable, since this is not going to be operating on wireless, because after all, if wireless is down, then NEMS would have no way of alerting you what's going on. So we'll switch over here to the input that I have placed the Raspberry Pi on, and we do have power. We should see an image here in just a second. There we go. There's the self-test, and then we should start seeing it load the image here. And there, so you're seeing it as it is coming up, and let me turn that off so you can see the full extent of what's coming up. And this is something you wouldn't normally see on startup because you're not going to necessarily be looking at this through the HDMI port, but getting to it over a web browser. And it basically, what it should have done there is resize the card to take full advantage of it. And then we'll come up through here, and it should complete the startup process at this point and give us a screen that shows us the IP address that it will be accessible on. And that's something that you probably want to go in to either your internet router or whatever is supplying your DHCP and getting it to where it gives out a fixed IP address. Anything that's of what I would call a critical nature, you'll want to have it always come up on the same address. So now, as they say, is the pregnant pause. Because there we go. Now it's starting to load that, and at least it gives you a little bit of a okay, there's your IP address in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, so we know what address to use to get to it from now on. It's giving us the version, services. This is a little bit more than I was expecting the first time through. So Do not have expected number of indices. Okay, well, it's just giving us current state. So anyway, we should be able to then go on. Okay, it must just be wrapping around yet. NEMS server is not initialized. Okay, so we've got to fire up SSH. And let's go into the web browser just to see what we can get it to show us. Okay, I tried to circumvent some of what's going on, and through the web browser there was just enough of it there to saying the server's not yet initialized. So what we're going to have to go through and do is do like the instructions say, is we will need to open up a session and run that command there. So let's just go ahead and get started here. So 10.0.1.159. Yes. Well, anytime you can't get into something, it always pays to read the documentation. But folks, who wants to read the documentation? So I went and searched and found out that when you first bring it up, it is going to require those credentials right there. So NEMSadmin, NEMSadmin. So we will just restart this session since I gave it a different, we'll call it duplicate session, because that way we can just not have to go through a bunch of keyboard typing. So NEMSadmin, NEMSadmin. All right, so we are in to the system there. And as it said over here on this page, sudo -nems init. So we'll copy, go back over here, and let's make that a little bit easier to read. Okay, and sudo -nems init, new password. I'll use that for now. Okay, America. Okay, let's see here if we can go. Okay, that's about as close as I think we're gonna hit it. And we will just go all locales, Debian package, fine. We'll take the default. I've got no reason to think otherwise at this point. So this is going to take a little while to get in place. And it's gonna, I'm just going to keep the name. Okay, well, okay, we'll call it root. Okay. We'll just change that to, well, I'll change that later in the process. Now, a trick I've used over the years, and I learned this at one company, is say if your user ID is the first letter of your first name and then your last name, to make your admin account, and I always would keep a separate account for the administrative stuff so that you're not doing things with your main account, that just do something like ADM and then your username, so you know you're using the admin account or something with admin privileges. All right, well, now we can go over here. Oh, well, how nice of it. It automatically knew that we were there. So it sees how much memory that we've got, how much is left, which is another good indication with how much it took off the top. A 16 gig card wouldn't have had that much left to use. Now, all the work that you have put in to get NEMS up and running is going to pay off. Let's switch over to my trusty Intel NUC, and I'm going to show you what it can look like, because I've been working for several hours to get it here, and this is what is going to look like once you get things set up. Now, this is what I've done so far. Now, not all the devices are going to be able to support everything you're going to want to do. They're going to say like no matching services. What that means is when you set them up, that you didn't tell it to check HTTP, SSH where some of the things like FreeNAS, Open Media Vault, and yes, I do have 3 NAS systems. I have set them up to monitor additional services. So that's not going to be for everything, but I guess the line in the sand is when you see something like LifeX, Philips Hue, if it's got an IP address, you can manage it. Well, you can at least see that it's up. If it doesn't have any sort of a web interface or SSH interface, then this is what you're going to look at. What we're going to do is I'm going to actually deconstruct a few of these things to show you how I set it up. Had to stop there for a moment to get a few things ready. Now, this is a little different. If you've never dealt with a network management system, or you may have heard the initials NMS, this is a little bit different, but it's nothing you can't do. This is, once you've seen a few of the quirks you may have to deal with, you're going to go to town on this one, and you're really going to be able to watch your entire smart home network. So what we need to do is go over here, and we'll go under configuration, and then we'll go to NEMS configurator. Then we will add, we'll add. So actually, I want to back up a step here. We first want to do a group, and here's why. It's going to help us get things organized. So we'll go to adding a group, and we'll just call it lights. Executive decision. Yeah, let's go ahead and do this first. We'll add lights, and you have to enter an alias, even though I only address it by one way. And you'll click submit, and you've successfully added lights. But before anything is seen, this is the step that you've got to go through any time you touch Nagios or NEMS, is you click on generate Nagios config. And as long as you have no warnings or errors, let me get my ugly mug out of the way here. As long as you have no warnings or errors, you're good to go. So once you've done that, click deploy. And you don't have to create the groups at once. I'm just trying to help you go through this a little bit easier. Now, what we're going to do is the host name, we're going to call, and then LifeX Color 100. That's one of my LifeX bulbs. Now, if you get an error, it's probably because it can't resolve this. And let's face it, what time is there going to be spaces in the host name? But you'll bear with me. You'll see this just a second, and we'll bring over the IP address. Now, for right now, it's going to look like we're categorizing it wrong, and we are, but that's because this isn't set up to do smart home the way that we're going to be doing this. But this will get you up and running, and then we can get fancy in later videos. So we'll just say Linux server. Now, here's one of the big things you got to remember to do, and that is click on monitored by and select default Nagios. If you don't do that, it's not going to show up under management. So we'll just say generic host under host templates. And we'll put admins as the contact group. We can put it under another group if we want to, if there's one there, but that's parent host rather. Okay. Then we can assign them to a host group. Remember that lights group we created earlier? This is where you will assign that if you create it in advance. If not, you can create it later. So we'll click on lights. We will click on the little right arrow there and then click submit. Again, that you got to submit this stuff or it doesn't happen. Now we'll go to generate Nagios config. Okay, now see, this is what I'm talking about, error generating config. And this one stumped me for several hours until I found a way around it. It's going to say, let's see, couldn't find LifeX Color 100, couldn't register host. It's basically was doing a DNS lookup to try to find that name, and it didn't exist. Well, not all of your smart home devices are going to have a DNS entry. So how you fix that is you go under host, LifeX color 100, and this is real simple. You're not going to have to, there's not a magic setting on this to deal with. I just picked the value 10. Max check attempts. That was how I finally fixed this. So we've saved that. We generate config. Bingo bango. Bob's your uncle. Now, no errors. We'll click deploy. That's there. So we'll go back over here to the NEMS server. Then we will go to reporting. Now you can go to the Adagios interface. This is certainly one way to look at it. I'm still leaning towards the classic Nagios interface. We'll go down here to host groups overview. And if you see, guess what? There you go. There's LifeX 100 and we've got it monitored. So the same thing is now we'll go back here into, okay, we lost our configurator, but that's fine. We can get it back. You just go, there's NEMS configurator from the main menu. We'll click on add a host and we'll do LifeX mini. And then we will change the IP address. Not change it, we'll add it. Monitored by default Nagios. We'll make it generic host. Admins. Then we will go down here and on the max check attempts, 10. Go down here to lights. Assign it to that host group. Submit. We'll go back here and add that one host back. Now, normally I wouldn't do more than one change at a time, but I've been through this enough today while I was getting the video shot that I'm not going to get too concerned about that one because I've run through the errors enough. And we'll paste in the host name, the address. Again, gotta select the default Nagios. We'll make it a generic host. Contact groups right now is not going to do a whole lot because we're not enabling it. I'm just trying to get you up and running at this point. And we'll go here to max check attempts 10. We will assign it to the lights host group. We'll submit. Now I'm going to shift back over here for just a second. Oh, I had my configurator page there. All right. Now notice there's there's just the one light there. Now we'll go over here to NEMS configurator and we'll say generate Nagios config. Again, no errors, nothing up my sleeve. So that's what you've got to see. We'll click on deploy. Again, it came through, it's fine. And we'll come over here and then we will just refresh the page. We lost our host group. I got to just click on host group overview. Now, don't worry if it says pending right away because it's going to take it sometimes a few minutes to go out and check things. It's already checked the LifeX color 100 bulb and it will clear this in a moment. Now, the reason the Philips Hue bridge is here, there are devices like the Philips Hue bulbs that some of them have to have the bridge sitting there in order for you to talk to them. So this is why we can at least monitor the bridge. We can't monitor at this point that I've been able to find a way to watch those devices that don't have an IP address because after all, NEMS/Nagios looks for IP addresses. And it does refresh about every 90 seconds. Now you can go up here and do a page refresh. Now actually I should have just clicked on host group overview. Now in this case, it must have been just the right cycle. Okay, all three are up. If we click on the name, you'll see status up, but we're not really watching any of the other services because we didn't set it up for that. And if we do view extended information, again, we're just showing what it's set to do. This is just a very basic install. Now, if we go down here to, well, we'll pick OMV. If we click on that, so you can see where I clicked on the services and it shows HTTP and SSH. So we're actively watching those. So first of all, we're on that. We're getting to it by ping. We're making sure that it's boxes responding, but then this also goes through the standpoint of checking for the services. So it's possible that whatever smart home device you've got could be up and running on the network, but one or more of the services may have stopped. So this is something that there is so much to do here. There's the sky is going to be the limit. I mean, you already see that I'm putting things from the studio in here. I've got my streaming receivers. Now see, I've got the HD home runs, and I've got a service right now on HTTP on both those, because that's how I can get to those to work on them. There's not a separate client for that. And you can see I'm watching my internal network. So this is, you can basically, I'm just pinging the management IP address of all the devices. And if one of them's down, then I will have an indication, except if the Ubiquiti switch 8's down, then obviously I'm not getting to anything because everything is down, because I've got NEMS talking over a wired connection. So this is just, like I said, I want to emphasize this again. This is just getting the surface scratched to where you can see what it's capable of doing. So even if it's nothing but by IP address, and some of your smart devices, maybe even more than a few, you can get to them by IP address only, because you have to have a management application or a configuration application to talk to them. But at least you can verify that they're seen on the network. Then what you can do is, this is just in the early stage here, I've got all Ubiquiti gear on my internal network. So I've got the IP addresses there, and I can see that everything is responding. That's a good bit of information to know when you're trying to troubleshoot why something's not working. If the switch is up and running, then we have to infer to a degree that you've got services running through there. With my NAS boxes, and yes, I do have 3, I can see that not only are they responding to ping, but in this case, I've got both HTTP and SSH being watched to make sure that they're there. Of course, the NEMS server set itself up on here, and you can see all the number of services or the tests that it's running. So it's just going to be a matter of what you're running. At a minimum, if all you can get is just a ping test, that's better than what you had before. And you notice I got Key by Amazon. I can watch the MyQ controller as well as the Ring camera to make sure that they're up and responding. So if there's a delivery and I can't see things, I may have a different problem, but at least you've got some troubleshooting information to work with. This is just the beginnings of what NEMS/Nagios can do for you. I've got 2 other videos already planned. I've got to flesh out a little bit more of the internal setup, because there's some things that I want to watch, and then I'm going to walk you through setup, how to test outside of your network, so that when the internet appears not to be working, that you at least have an idea of where the problem may be. And then you can communicate to the ISP if they don't have some visibility to see what's going on. And then for those that are working from home, your company probably has some third-party systems that you have to get into, and those aren't always up. So again, we're going to be looking to setting up yet some other monitoring for that. So we'll use host groups. I'm right now going through and figuring out how I want to get them set up, because with my working from home, I've got systems I depend on offsite, and this is going to be something that all of us can help, but at least we've got an idea of what you're seeing. And I'm sorry, I'm motioning to something that you can't see. You know, with having some visibility here, this is better than having nothing, even if it's only by ping. It's at least more than what you had. So go ahead and start setting it up. This is something that's going to work a lot to help you have an idea of where to start troubleshooting things if they become a problem. And at least gives you more information than what you had. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will see videos on the screen that are similar to the one you've just watched or other content that YouTube thinks you might be interested in. If this video helps you or provides value, please click on that like button, thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click on subscribe now and enable notifications. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.